Good afternoon, everyone. It's 12:30. It's Wednesday. Welcome to Lancat Home Games. I see a number of you are still piling in on the attendance record there. Thanks very much for showing up to what I believe is the 27th. Or might be the 28th Lancat Home Games. So we've been, by the power of great arithmetic, we can figure out that we've been going at this for over half a year, and what a year it's been. Today we are joined with the one and only, one of the best kept secrets actually within financial services. It is Rosanna Williams-Wood, who is she runs one-to-one leadership coaching as the Secret Coach, and she also runs a kind of group coaching business with Summit Human Potential. Very quick hello to Ros. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks, Steve. How are you?
I'm all right. Well, that's a loaded question, Ros, because I've just spent 5 minutes complaining about the week. So I'm going to spend 30 seconds moaning about it just in case we get interrupted. We're having a mare with the family. We've all been ill for about 2 or 3 weeks. It's not the bad thing. It's just other back to school bugs or what have you. But last night, our 11-month-old Eva was up being sick at 1 o'clock in the morning. And then the night before that, our 5-year-old Amelie came into me at 3 o'clock in the morning. She'd had a fever dream about bears. She's absolutely terrified of bears. And she's like, "Daddy, are bears real?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, they are, but there's very few bears in East Lothian. So it's loads of other stuff you've got to worry about, but certainly not wild bears, which...
lots of stuff to worry about, not bears, yeah. It's just making me think of that, who was it? Comedian, Northwest, can't think of his name now, who did the John Smith advert, yeah. Worry about the other
Peter
thing.
Kay.
Thank you, yes. It's don't worry about the bad guy, the monsters under the bed, worry about the burglary.
It's the burglars coming in through the window you've got to worry about. Yeah, absolutely. So one thing nobody has to worry about is State of the Advisor Nation, #marketing. And if you're a member of the advice profession and you're tuning in this week, so I know lots of you do and lots of you have done this already, if you have a spare 20-25 minutes or so after this, if you click on this button here or here, depending on which way you're looking, that is our big annual sentiment study with the advice profession that we are going on and on and on and on and on and on about. If you follow us, if you subscribe to our emails, if you follow us on social media, and we're not going to stop going on about it till we've smashed last year's target. And we're about 75% of the way there. So we've got another week or so to go. Last 1 or 2 bits of admin. This is a really interesting subject, and I can't wait to talk to Ros about this over the next 40 minutes or so. But I want to hear loads of questions and see loads of chat on the sidebar about leadership and training and about coaching and about good and bad experiences you've had with team dynamics, bad bosses, good bosses, all that kind of stuff, because we have the nation's leading light on the subject with us today. She's too modest to say that for herself, obviously. But
well, I'm not shy of an opinion. I'm a bit of a gob on a stick about it, so I'll certainly share.
Lancat Mike cracks knuckles. Yeah, very good. Last thing to say is that if you have buffering issues, which are obviously stuff that we didn't have to worry about before this year, if your audio video is a little bit out of sync, if you click on that link and hit refresh and all those kind of good things, it does something clever. I can't really figure out what it does, but it seems to fix any buffering issues. The very, very, very last admin-y type thing to say, and then we'll dedicate the rest of the chat to Ros, obviously, is that if you're interested in home games and previous editions, go to YouTube, search Lancat. There's very few Lancats in the world. It should direct you to us. And you can get the full archive of the other top class episodes. Right, that's all the boring stuff out the way. Ros, tell us a wee bit about you, about your businesses, what it is you do. What does your 9 to 5 look like? And is it even a 9 to 5?
Oh, that's a really big question. What does my 9 to 5 look like? It doesn't look like 9 to 5. That's the first thing. I am married to a chap called Tim, who I love dearly, who works in engineering, and he is usually still in bed at 7 when I get back from my 6 till 7 walk. And then he's overtaken my home office at the moment. And I am busy doing a combination of working with existing clients, talking to new clients, dealing with COVID, running business, doing my own personal development, making sure I'm fit and healthy as well, and trying to kind of eat my own cooking on the personal development space. So there is really no typical 9 to 5. And I guess that talks to how I feel about the fact I love work. I've always loved work. And when I was in corporate, which I was up until, from 88 till 2016, I had a bit of a saying for myself, which is I never wanted to give up work. I just didn't want to work this hard. I think I am still working hard and long, but in a different way. It's more of a sort of purposeful way. And, I feel like I'm finally a round peg in a round hole, which at points in my financial services career, I've felt that, and at other points I haven't. So
what did you do? So before the secret coach and the summit human. I told you I'm struggling. Summit human potential. A professional host would have it written down, Ros, in the list of things I want to say to you. What did you do in your corporate days then? Before you?
It's interesting. A couple of people on the chat, and I had to ask you which Jeff it was. So hello, Jeff. Good to see you. We used to share an office back in Leicester in the Aviva days. So I was wondering about this. Did I fall into financial services? Because we keep all saying that we fell into financial services. I chose to come into financial services, albeit by accident. And hi, Jeff. And that was the fact that I was 18 years old. I think that was probably my first little existential crisis, if you can have an existential crisis at 18. I thought I was going to be an artist. And I knew I needed to earn money because I was already living without my parents at that point. And I was at art school trying to do graphic art and design because that was going to earn me money, definitely not being a fine artist. And I walked past the job centre, and it was a job advertised for somebody between 25 and 30 with their own car to collect insurance premiums for Liverpool Victoria. So I thought, well, I'm 18, I'm not 25, but shoulders back, fake it till you make it. I think I can do that. And that's how I started in financial services. And it was just a really good grounding. That was 1988. So it was just at that kind of interesting point that regulation was beginning to take a bit more hold. So I have kind of seen it through the cowboy years, if I can put it like that. And yeah, I moved into mortgage advice. I've been a mortgage advisor. We used to call it broker consultant, business development manager. I had an absolutely amazing time at Scandia. Somebody's referenced Scandia in the chat. So I joined Scandia in 2009. And that was because I took some time out to do an MBA, and my dissertation was on the future of financial services. And back in 2002, I'd been looking at platforms and things like that. And, that was still the chat on the sort of Australian chat. And I was like, wow, I don't want to work for any other traditional providers. At the time I was at Aviva. Well, it was Norwich Union back then. And, their proposition, I spoke to Stephen Gay at the time, and said, hang on, I've just kind of looked at this RDR thing and worked out that we've got bonds that we're busy selling out at 7%. How's that going to work? And what about this platform space? No, we're not there. So I moved to Scandia on the back of that. And again, that was just great times in terms of being in the platform sales team. But then even that emerged, it was the fact that why did you need platform sales managers when you got a sales force of however many we'd got back then? And I moved into business change, and that move into business change was helping advisors with their proposition, and that led me on to doing a diploma in work-based psychology, because I kind of saw how advisors were bloody good advisors, were trying to wrestle with this whole RDR thing, but it was almost that challenge of change, either for themselves or people. And that kind of led me into then at Scandia Old Mutual being involved in culture and looking at culture surveys. And then I was coaching people on the side without any coaching qualifications, and thought, well, if I'm going to do this for real, I better do it now, and I better do it properly. So, oh gosh, I talked way too long there.
It's great because what it does, Ros, is it stops me talking. And then I don't have a persistent cough, but a couple of people are already having a go at my cough. And I know there's a wee subtext in 2020 about the cough. I don't have.
Shut up, because I'm used to, this is why I like coaching, is it's usually about the other person, not about me.
No, not at all. So at what point along the line then, so, you're starting to get into business change and coaching. Is that when the germ of the idea to start getting into proper coaching yourself started, or have you always been interested in that? Had you seen dysfunction along the way in terms of how teams were run? What is it that added up to that decision to go on your own and do this?
Yeah, I guess that there has to be dysfunction in teams, because that's often the tension. Any team has its own dynamic, and any system has its own dynamic that is really unique. And actually, once you're in it, you can't see it objectively anyway, because you're in it and you're part of it and you're contributing to it. And I'm not going to put my finger in this water, but if I did, whilst my finger's in there, I'm in the system, I'm part of it. Once I take my finger out, I've left grease and kind of whatever. Let's assume my fingers are clean. There's a bit of me left in it, but I'm still. I guess whilst I was in systems, I was probably playing. And I guess this is when you start learning about psychology and things like that. I could get into that typical sort of drama triangle of, who's the villain, who's the victim. I would often play the rescuer. So, in a team where people are kind of bitching and complaining, I would usually go, well, maybe this, maybe that, maybe the other. And even that would create tension, because people don't always want to hear that. Sometimes they do an arm around the shoulder and being acknowledged for how they feel. And I went on my own personal development journey really early. I mean, where was I? I'm just trying to kind of pitch it based on relationships and where I was living at the time. It was kind of the mid 90s, and I had a piece of feedback from a line manager who had never really spent much time with me, but just said, well, I think your confidence is arrogance and your assertiveness is pushy. And I kind of thought, oh, heck, those are the things I've always held up as my strengths. So then what I saw myself do in that system and in that relationship is just become less of me, until I eventually left and went somewhere else. and probably then had to kind of unpick that in a different way. So that was, you know, a personal example. And, you know, I think there is a challenge that we can, and people can start self-selecting themselves out of industries and environments because feedback is so poor. And in the UK, we're bad at asking for feedback. We're bad at giving it. We're bad at receiving it. You know, there's so much to kind of, if we're talking about performance here, that's where we need to go to, is to learn about ourselves and others and relationships and things like that.
So let's talk a little bit about, because we'll come back to a lot of that. And Sean, thanks for your question earlier, Sean. We'll get onto that, promise, and shout at me if we don't towards the end. Let's talk about your one-to-one work with, you know, whether it's business leaders or executives or whoever. So why typically do people come to you? Are they on the start of their journey as a senior leader and they want some help, or have they gone past that oh fuck moment where things are out of control and they need a bit of help, or are they pushed towards you? How does it work?
It's kind of all of those. It's all of the above, really. I think there's more of a thing, rather than why, I think there's usually a when rather than a why. And that when can be that they are preparing to step up. So in the best cases where I can make real difference and the individual can go on an appropriate journey, it's usually when they've been identified as talents. We're getting them ready for something big, like doing an MBA or succession planning, and we can really do that in a safe way. There are times that we've done that immediately in the sort of transition. You know, you've just stepped up, and it's the typical kind of, what are you going to do in the first 60 days, so that that individual has that support as well. The other sort of when it comes in is, and when there is, because people don't just wake up and go, I want coaching. There's usually some level of discomfort, even that I'm going to step up, I'm going to step aside, I'm going to step away. That can be part of the when. But it can also be, and it's interesting that you say about that. I kind of alluded to you alluded to the fact that it can be done to you. You know, there is some of that goes on as well. So I do get brought in to organisations. I will never say to fix somebody, and I would never make that promise, because, you know, that's the assumption that somebody's broken. But it might be the fact that there is an individual whereby their line manager or HR of saying we want to keep this individual, but there is some performance/development challenges. Because it's interesting, if we kind of compare the UK use of language to, say, American, if you got on a performance coach in America, you go, wow, you know, that's great. I'm somebody special who deserves a performance coach. If we use that language in the UK, people think performance management and therefore remedial. So,
or you're about to be managed out of an organization.
Exactly. So, you know, but there is also a space for the, you know, very senior person who is at the top of their career right now, and they're working out succession under them, but they're also looking at what their identity might be, having given a career to something when they step out of that organization. So usually at the tops of organizations, it's a little bit more existential, really. You know, what is this about me? What am I going to leave behind? What am I going to move towards? And I think, you know, if I draw some parallels to the advice planning space, I think that's probably where a lot of that is as well, is helping people into that transition into their next bit. Oh, somebody's asked something about feedback. Okay.
That's okay. Let's take the first question then. So Rosanna, regarding gathering feedback effectively, what do you view as the most successful way of attaining it? Also, is there anything you would recommend avoiding at all costs? Good question, Johnny.
Yeah, I think in terms of feedback, I think it's if you as an individual, and it has to come down to the person first. If I really want to develop, I need to start seeking feedback. And in terms of if I choose to go on that development journey, I would encourage people to go to trusted individuals and pose a 5-to-1 ratio. And this is about saying, tell me 5 things you appreciate about me or my work. And 1 thing you'd ask me to consider doing differently. Because our brains are tuned to hear the negative. That's how we've survived. That's how we've survived this long. And to the point on what to avoid at all costs, it is the shit sandwich. The shit sandwich tastes of shit. Let's stop it right now. But I think if you're in a leadership position right now, is you can role model this with people around you and say, I'm really trying to embrace feedback for myself. And if you choose to do that, that's great. Can you, me as the leader, can you give me 5 things you appreciate about me or my work, and 1 thing you'd ask me to consider differently? That is outside of an expensive 360 type environment. You don't have to pay anybody to do that and give you a detailed report. And also that really, if it's done in the most humble way, without you kind of questioning that person's perception too much, it can really power your own self-awareness. But we're uncomfortable. I'm wondering whether anybody's really embracing getting their own feedback. And even then, the thing that you ask somebody to consider, you know what? You consider it. It's not an absolute. It's not an absolute.
That's brilliant, Ros. And like loads of this is going to be very helpful, I'm sure, to people tuning in. I'm just interested in the notion of structure, right, and how team dynamics and how large organizations structure themselves in terms of hierarchies and stuff like that. Because I was going to be all cute and talk about a hypothetical example, but I'm going to use me as an example, right? There's no need to dance around the subject. So back in 2011 or 2012 or whenever it was, so this is pre-Lancat days, I was working for again, I don't need to hide it because we've got LinkedIn and people can find out. I was working for Royal London at the time, which is a brilliant organisation for loads of different reasons. And I'd been on a very, clear path, I guess, from joining a company ages ago, like 16, 17 years ago. I was a junior analyst, and then you became an analyst, and then you became a senior analyst, and you started signing off some of the work. And then we had a restructure, and I was thrust into the role of team leader for the research team at the time, with no real chat about that being a natural career progression. Still doing most of the work, now in charge of 4 or 5 people, most of whom I would consider friends. And I was hopeless at it, right? And I make no bones about the fact that it didn't go very well for lots of different reasons. But it seems to me from speaking about this, because I spoke about this at length in the mental health stuff for various reasons, because it is all linked in my backstory. But it strikes me that this goes on quite a lot in financial services and potentially other industries too. And I don't know, because I've not worked in a different sector. But this notion of you do a job, you're junior in it, then you become established, then you become senior, and before you know it, you're in charge of people. That, to me, seems like it could be fatally flawed for a number of reasons. Do you see that? Is that a sensible way to go about evolving structures?
It's not a sensible way to evolve structures, but it's typically in a hierarchical sense of what we do in a traditional sense. So you're good at this job, and then it's like, oh, well, you'll be good at that job, and therefore you'll be good at that job. I mean, we only need to look at sports as a great example, whereby being a star player doesn't necessarily make you a star manager or a star coach. It can do, but it doesn't necessarily correlate. And I think the big challenge for people, and the thing that isn't often discussed when people make these steps up, is how you then get that support in that step up. Because I think where there is support in that step up, whether that be an external coach, whether that be an internal mentor, whether that be a line manager with really good emotional intelligence and a relationship of trust that can have that chat, then you can actually start giving that step some acknowledgement. And the acknowledgement is, you're not going to know it all. Why would you know it all? You knew that really well. You were really good at that. But being good at that doesn't necessarily make you being good at that. And, you know, the typical journey is, well, I'm going to be a manager. So if we take like leadership on one side and management on another, and it's not that binary. Leadership in its purest sense is about the people, is about inspiring, is about enabling, but it's also about results. Management is more short term, getting the task done, delivering it now. So as a junior manager, you're still going to be responsible for the task, but there is still a bit of a people bit in there. And if you've always been good at the task or the outcome, you're still going to be tempted to do a lot of that as well. You're not necessarily going to start enabling your people. So we often find that people don't kind of bring people up with them. They just do more and more. Salespeople and sales leadership is possibly the archetypal problem of this, whereby you've got a star in the sales piece that then moves into sales management. And then it's all about that. Then they still love the rush of the relationship and, oh, take me out for a day and let me see all of your or some of your best advisors. And then they step into the role of doing what they've always loved, rather than actually coming back and developing the people. Because we've got ego. We've all got ego. We want to be significant and relevant. So, you know, it's managing that step, and all of the way there's the next step and the next step, and that's how growth comes.
And do you think that do you think anybody could be a good leader, or are there inherent qualities in people, whether it's, you know, charisma, or if you're talking about the business leader who needs to be a figurehead, because that's a thing, as you've rightly said, and then there's management and structural and task oriented stuff. But can anybody be coached to be a good leader, or are there certain qualities that you need to have?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Sean's just put up in the chat bar there about the Adair model, which is team, task, and individual. And, you know, for instance, that comes from the military, and the military are very good at the leadership space. So a lot of leadership theory has come from the military, but even they're beginning to kind of change some of their emphasis. They always used to do this task, team, individual, but probably the task will always loom large because it is bigger than any individual. But what even the military are starting to do now, and, you know, I'd encourage anybody to Google, YouTube, CAL, CAL, so that's the Centre for Army Leadership. They're doing some really nice leadership videos that start to take the notion of the fact that it's not just about this hero leadership, as you're saying there, Steve, or that's what I think you're alluding to. Is it what you're alluding to, that kind of big figurehead leader?
Yeah, a little bit. I was more Do you know, honestly, Ros, it was more I was going to get on to talk about things like empathy and, you know, the gender disparity that we have in financial services and whether that's holding us back in terms of leadership structures and stuff like that. But yeah, that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I've gone down. I've sent myself down a little rabbit hole. I was enjoying that too much. Yeah, in terms of, I think leadership for me, and if I kind of connect it back to that, where a lot of it's come from in the sort of military space and things like that, we've all been influenced by leaders that we've worked with. So, you know, any of us on this chat today can probably think of a really empowering, important leader that we have worked with. And, you know, I'm thinking of several now, but they're all 10, 15 years older than me. So their experience and what they grew up with, they probably had a leader that was also 10 or 15 years older than them that they took some elements from. I think we need to start thinking about leadership completely different. I think we need to be very visionary and future, and really most leaders should be visionary in their thinking, but thinking about new ways of leading. And I think that sort of empathy and that empathy and emotional intelligence bit is the biggie, because to be a leader, you've had to strive and get through certain steps to get where you are. And you've probably become quite gritty over time to do that. So, you know, how do you really, and, you know, Simon Sinek's talking about servant leadership. So there's lots of labels to this. But I think it's very much about saying, what kind of leader do I really want to be?
So this links to, I think it was Sean, forgive me if it wasn't, but Sean asked right at the very start, and you alluded to it there, Ros, when you thought about the leaders that you admire. Who do you admire, who either historically or now would have demonstrated, you know, textbook leadership, and why?
And I think it's all in the communication. You know, I don't even know whether I should say this, especially given the north of the border piece, but I think Nicola Sturgeon is amazing. You know, she's a really, I don't know enough about her you know, the political agenda, because it's your agenda, not mine. And there's me trying not to cause any offence. But I think, for instance, the way she communicates with emotional intelligence, with empathy, and actually Boris occasionally does that when he really gets down to the, you know, I know how you're feeling type thing. But then he comes out with some Greek classic that I think probably loses people along the way. But I think it's those leaders that really, Michelle Obama, you know, not a leader in her own right, but really inspiring, really connected, really realistic, really pushing for something new. Yes, I love her too, Kate. So
yeah, I was gonna be mischievous, but you know, 2 or 3 people have mentioned it already in the chat, so I can blame them for bringing it up. But you know, imagining a hypothetical situation where, you know, we're in a post-apocalyptic era next year. Let's imagine things keep getting worse, and you walk into a room and you've got to vote, and on the left-hand side of the room's Boris, Mr. Trump, and maybe your man from Brazil as well. The Bampa over there, and on the right hand side of the room's Jacinda, Nicola Sturgeon, and Angela Merkel. Who are you?
I'm on the right hand side of the room, most certainly, but not because they're women, but because of how they've performed. You know, that's what matters to me as much as anything else, and it is. Yeah, it's less about that individual personality, and it's more about that community approach.
And I'm being totally mischief and reducing complex things like global pandemics and governance down to gender split. But you know, if you look at Scandinavia, New Zealand, Germany, is there now too much of a pattern to say that women are making better leaders, and that men are reduced to populism, as Sean has just put there?
We're just going to have to see how time plays out on that. I think, I mean, the biggest challenge for me on the gender debates, and without getting too much into gender politics, is I think the biggest challenge for me, especially when we look in financial services, is, and when you start looking at any gender reports, and they do those nice sort of pyramids, 50-50 at the kind of doer level, men, women, and then you see the next layer, less women, then you see the next layer, less women, less women. I think there's a more interesting question here, which is, why do women self-select themselves out of leadership in certain industries? So financial services is, after airline pilots, after football clubs, financial services is the biggest gender pay gap.
So we talked.
And that isn't because they're not paid fairly. It's because they don't move into revenue generation roles where the pay is bigger, and so are the
Because we talked. I know you watched the one we did with the home games we did with Rohan Sivajoty, and we talked a little bit about, the disparity at senior leadership level. And I think he mentioned a stat to me that there's more men called Steve who are in charge of FTSE 100 firms or whatever or on the board than there are women. And as much as I'm in favour of institutional bias towards Steve's, do you think, is there work to be done there? Would that make the some of the issues that you have to sweep up in terms of team dynamics and those kind of problems? Would we be better off with a fairer split across the board? But I mean, it's full of problems trying to achieve that, obviously, and we're not going to solve it here with Steve's overly simplistic ramblings. But how do we get better at stuff like this?
Yeah, I think it's about getting leaders. It's about getting leadership at all levels, and it is about getting more females on that journey, because we see, and I'm a bit of a geek for this, so I do pore over the Hampton-Alexander reports, which and the gender pay gap piece, and what we are seeing is more women on boards. We've hit that target, but we're not seeing the women in that exco level, in that director level. And the sort of cries that are coming back from that is, well, we haven't got enough women in the talent pool. Well, why haven't we got enough women in the talent pool? Is it because you haven't marked them out as talent because they've got something different to their male colleagues? Is it because they've already self-selected themselves out? Is it like the Sheryl Sandberg debate that says we've all got to be leaning in and doing more, or we've got to be more confident about that? That whole trope that is, well, men only need to be 60% confident to go for a promotion, whereas women have to be 100% confident. And then, of course, there's only one biological sex that has children. So it's far from fixed, but I think I do sense there's a will there. If I think about financial services, I think we need to make it more attractive. It is. I was often the only woman in the room in a leadership position, less women in the sales position. Yeah, lots in admin, lots in marketing, lots in HR, but in that sales space, so long gone are the days where you had to stay up way too late and drink way too much and swear too much. But and I lived through that and I enjoyed most of it, but it could put off a lot of people that aren't high on that yang energy You know, I can turn up my yang energy, but it's bloody exhausting.
We've just had a great question in from Sean, and then we'll move on to a different subject I want to check in with you just before we finish. Big question: does the current pandemic situation require a good leader or a good manager? And if you were going to coach a Western leader, who would it be, and what would you tell them to do? That's a great question.
Wow. Yeah, it's almost a bit retrospective who I would coach. I would have loved to have coached Theresa May, because I think she'd got a lot of those sort of detail management oversight bits, but she was kind of missing some of that sort of emotional engagement. And you know, we saw when she was on the steps that she cared so deeply. So why didn't we get that along the way? Because I think there's something about authenticity. I think in terms of good leaders and good managers, if we're talking about a small organization, then you need to be both. You need to be really clear in what the task is that you need doing, how you need it doing, what outcome you expect. But you can also apply a big dose of leadership on that, which is not micromanaging people. Because I think, you know, the micromanagement piece is also incredibly destructive. And that is often what we do when we step up that level as well, is we go, well, that I did that really well, and I want you to do it exactly the way I did. And that doesn't allow people to grow. It doesn't allow people to be, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, to actually add anything different to that. There might be a better way, and it assumes that we know it all. So the best thing for me, as any leader, as any manager, as any team member, is stay curious and ask questions and assume you don't know it all, because we don't.
Let's just finish with one question, Ros, because we're rapidly running out of time. It's been a great session. Let's leave people with some practical advice, and let's flip this on its head completely. We've talked about what leaders should do and what managers should do, but most of us who are tuning in have to answer to someone. Ultimately, how do employees get the best out of their relationship with their bosses? How should they behave? What kind of questions should they ask, and how should they build that relationship?
It's learning to manage up, and that isn't, and I think lots of people will end up managing up so much they're managing up to the leader's ego. I would say that everybody has got leadership. You know, it doesn't have to be in a title. It doesn't have to be the people you're leading. But it is in that relationship with the person above you or across you, across your peers. And it is about saying, it is about connecting with the purpose. Everybody we answer up to has got a criteria, a scorecard, something they want to achieve. What I always did in my corporate career is ask for my manager's scorecard, because guess what? Their scorecard, mine's going to be a percentage of that. So just get on board as quickly as possible. What are we looking to achieve? If your leader's not good at sharing what that vision is, maybe you have to ask the key questions to get that out, to why that is important. So if we can connect with it as a group, that's when the magic happens, really. It's amazing. It's amazing. You know, and I've worked in teams like that, but, you know, few and far between.
Grand. Well, listen, Ros, that's us. We've busted our 45 minutes. I can't quite believe that it's gone so quickly. The only thing that remains to be said is thank you to everybody who's tuned in. The vast majority of you have stayed on to the very end. I know there's loads of stuff going on today in financial services. There's conferences all over the place. So a huge thank you for giving us 45 minutes of your hard-earned day. But of course, the biggest thanks of all to Rosanna Williams-Wood If you have leadership issues, then I would highly suggest you get in touch with Ros, because she's absolutely fantastic at what she does. Join us next week, where I think Mr. Poulsen will be back, and I believe he's talking to Adrian Murphy of Murphy Wealth, and that'll be another fantastic session. And catch us on YouTube if you want to watch any of the archive that we've hinted at along the session today. Cheerio. See you next week. Bye-bye.